Vineyard, happy Wednesday. It looks like winter is going to attempt to come back this week. I'm going to avoid talking about it. We're not going to go down that road. We're just going to hope that it just kind of flies on by, forgets about us, and maybe give us moisture, but not like, I don't know. I don't know how any of that would work. I'm just not looking forward to being cold again. But in other news, small group signups are winding down. We've got about 2 weeks left to sign up for the groups that are going to run from February to April. So if you haven't landed on one yet, check them out on the website, get connected. This is going to be a great way to spend the rest of the winter months. Now, also, I appreciate the attendance that we had at our family meeting this past Sunday. I realize how these can be long and tedious, but they're also so important to the health of the church. Accountability is vital when we are dealing with worship, especially worship in the form of the congregation's tithes and offerings. But also, hearing perspectives on what the coming months might look like is really very helpful to me. So thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time and showing that interest. Now, a week from Sunday, not this Sunday, but the Sunday following, we are kicking off a new connection point. The first Sunday of every month, we are going to have Sandwich Sunday. Right after worship together, we're going to have lunch. We're going to relax, have some family time together. There is no meeting, there's no agenda, just food and us. So my hope is that this becomes a regular part of our rhythm, that it becomes a connection point as we grow together. Speaking of that, also, we're in the midst of our series on glory, feeling the weighty presence of God presented through the Gospel of John. We're picking up some steam as we've rolled through chapter 4. This week on Sunday, we're going to be looking at more examples of Jesus displaying his glory as he presents himself as the self-expression of the living God. Now, one piece of the narrative that we did not talk about on Sunday is something captured between the experiences of Nicodemus and the woman at the well. There is some dialogue between the stories that provide another level of context for the ministry of Jesus. In John chapter 3, verse 22, we see John the Baptist step into the midst of an argument about ceremonial cleansing that demonstrates his understanding of who Jesus is and what Jesus is doing, but also he does it in a way that speaks through the centuries and lands on us in our time. Now, ceremonial cleansing is the action to make somebody worthy of standing before God, clean enough to stand before God or to worship and participate with community. Events of everyday life could lead someone to becoming ceremonially unclean. Things as simple as just coming into contact with something unclean, whether it be another person that's unclean or an animal, or just something that they just stepped in on the road that made them unclean. If you're thinking about the reality of cooties as experienced in grade school, you're not going to be too far off of what we're kind of talking about here. So, coming on the heels of this nighttime meeting between Jesus and Nicodemus, John, the gospel writer, captures what John the Baptist is doing. He's hearing an argument about ceremonial cleansing between another Jew and his disciples. And he's also seeing some competition begin to grow in his disciples because people are going to Jesus instead of to John. What John says in response to both of them slays the dragon of pride, but it also demonstrates his understanding of the mission of God and his role in that mission. John replies in verse 27, "No one can receive anything unless God gives it from heaven. You yourself know how plainly I told you, I am not the Messiah. I am only here to prepare the way for him. It's the bridegroom who marries the bride, and the bridegroom's friend is simply glad to stand with him and hear his vows. Therefore, I'm filled with joy at his success. He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. He's come from above and is greater than anyone else. We are of the earth, and we speak of earthly things. But he has come from heaven and is greater than anyone else. He testifies about what he has seen and heard, but how few believe what he tells them. Anyone who accepts his testimony can affirm that God is true. For he is sent by God, he speaks God's words, for God gives him the Spirit without limit." So much to pull from that for us today. But John speaks to this cleanliness issue, this cleanliness debate, and he says that we receive nothing unless it comes from God. And Jesus, sent by God, is God and has everything in his hands. The point then is faith in this provision. Faith that through Jesus we have everything that will lead us to the reality of adoption into the family of God. So this week, my challenge to us here at the Vineyard is this. What ways are we? What ways are you? What ways am I looking for a way to be worthy that doesn't come from God Himself? Is there anything that we're not trusting Him to provide? If we evaluate our faith in Jesus being enough, how are we doing? Where do we land? Reflect on this and please let me know how that goes. Also, please pray for me. Know that I am praying for you, and I will see you on Sunday.